Okay, that was my talk. It was about the power of classwork, so we're done. When Reverend Bonnie asked me to speak again, of course, my fear came up big time because speaking in public is not a big on my bucket list, never has been, and probably never would have been. But I know that all of you folks come here with love, and that this center is infused with love. Hence, if you keep sending me love during my talk, you'll dissipate any fear that might crop up. So I appreciate you guys being here. In fact, it reminded me of a song that we used to sing sometimes. It was called "There in This Very Room, There Is Enough Love." Just a wonderful, wonderful soul-touching song. And when preparing this talk around love dissolving fear, of course, we've all heard the stories of people in desperate situations that are helped by a family member or a friend or a complete stranger that see a life-threatening situation, and they don't even think about themselves. They just rush in out of love and perform these phenomenal feats. You've heard that they can lift cars off of people that are in danger, or they can fight off someone much bigger than themselves. And that comes from a place of love, whether they know it or not. It's an automatic response. And recently, I read a story on the internet that was really touching. This young mother had 3 young daughters and a young niece. She had taken them on a camping trip. So they were in the woods in a tent, and she heard a tree branch crack. Immediately, she yelled at the oldest child to run to the back of the tent, hoping that that would get her out of the way of danger. And then she threw herself on the top of the other kids, and the tree fell on her. She wasn't killed, but she was paralyzed, and she probably will be for the rest of her life. But her kids were safe. And when asked about it later, if she had any regrets, she said no. I could not bear the thought that my children would have been hurt, that I would have been unable to protect them. And even though she's in a wheelchair and will be there as her kids grow up, she at least gets to see them grow up. Don't you wonder, I wonder, would I be able to do something like that in an instant? Something to think about. So this morning I thought that I would bring into this talk some examples of how Doug and I have moved along our spiritual path and used moving from fear or anger or resentment or disappointment, moving through that with love. So I've brought some examples of how we did that. And trust me, we didn't always have small things that we needed to move through. Chopra does tell us that in the path to love, that love is everywhere, but in some places it is blocked by fear. And to continue with what Reverend Bonnie mentioned about love, her insight that love was like water, he also says, if it doesn't flow, it stagnates. So my background is I grew up in Tennessee with parents who were from the Midwest and a Scandinavian background. They were very stoic. So my 5 siblings and I never had a lot of demonstration of love, although we knew we were loved. We were well taken care of. We were honored and respected. We grew up with a strong moral center. We were taught to be self-reliant, to be loving, and we grew up with the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which segs nicely with religious science. I was confirmed in the Lutheran church, but after I left home, I really didn't go back. I didn't have a spiritual home until Doug introduced me to religious science, and my whole world changed. So, in my practice as a religious science practitioner, I have counseled people with relationship challenges. So I've looked back over my life in preparation for this talk and seen that even though I didn't know about religious science, there was something within me that knew that love was greater than anything. So at one point in my marriage, I took a look at my relationship and I envisioned it in the future. What was it going to look like? What would my life look like and what would my son's life look like if we continued on this same path? And I didn't like what I saw. We had a dysfunctional relationship that wasn't really working for any of us. So it would have been easy for me to just storm out of the house in anger and rip the family apart and prove that I was right to do that. But without even knowing it, there was something in me that knew that I shouldn't do that. So I waited until I got to the place that I can make a change out of love for myself, for our son, and also for my husband. He wasn't happy either. He really didn't like me telling him what he ought to do, how he ought to change his behavior. By golly. So that was powerful for me to be able, years later, to look back and see that I had chosen love over fear of the future and move forward for us. When Doug and I met, we both had negative relationship issues. We had disappointment. We had anger. We had less than loving experiences with our spouses. We'd like to call them, he calls Cheryl his starter wife, and I call Mark my starter husband. So they taught us a lot about how we wanted to move forward. So we took a look at all this, really it was crap that we had, just stuffed down and buried within us that we brought together in our relationship. And we were wise enough to know that we needed to start our relationship on a spiritual foundation. So we did, and the first one Bonnie mentioned in the introduction. It was really a Christ-based workshop, but the pods that they were going to do, the topics they had, sounded like it would help us. And the most powerful one for me was the power of your word. The power of your word. When you say something, mean what you say, and say what you mean. Even something as cavalier as when we depart from someone and we say, I'll call you. Remember, if you say that, then that's your word. So follow up. Be in the moment with what you're saying and what you're thinking. The next one we went to was a gentleman called Alexander Everett. And he was kind of different, but he was a gentle introduction to me into metaphysics. His powerful, I don't remember a lot about it, but the powerful part was he had a meditation that went through the colors of the rainbow in the meditation, and it took you really deep. And then years later, I connected with Dave Brandhorst because he knew Alexander Everett. So that got me to thinking about metaphysics in a non-threatening way. And I wanted to learn more. So our next stop on this journey was to find the center. Doug introduced me to it because he had been in religious science in California. And it resonated again with me. Something inside me resonated with what was being said here, although I must admit that at the beginning, the vocabulary was a little daunting at first, and it sounded like it was, you had to be in the inner circle to understand some of these terms and words. But classwork took care of that. It grounded us in spiritual principles and gave us a foundation to build on. And it provided us with a more expansive and definitive definition of love, as in love one another. It gave us a chance to look at our stuff, to look at our fears, look at our concerns, look at our expectations, and see them in the new vision of love. Larry mentioned one of these tools in his talk, where we learned the acronym for fear being false evidence appearing real. At first, for me, it was just a clever way, to remember the lesson, to be a good little student, and do the classwork. But over the years, I've used it a lot. It's a very powerful tool when we're in the middle of stuff, or we're scared about an outcome, or we're scared about a situation. Look at it from the eyes of love and know the truth of what it is. It's fact. It's what's going on in your life. But revision it with love and say, that's not the truth of who I am. I deserve better. I am better. Life is glorious. Life is magnificent. So think about it. If we believe that we are made in the image and likeness of God, that our experiences are of God, then what is there to fear? The facts are true, like I said, but we're at choice of how we respond and react. We can be an active participant in our life experiences, or we can sit back and bemoan it and say, ain't it awful, life is just really too hard, and be a victim. We're at choice. We can remember the truth and move through fear. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm saying it can be done in classwork. So it brings me back to the truth of my life. I've learned that difficult situations where fear may be involved could be things that are trying to get my attention, that want me to look at life from a different way, that are keeping me from having more joy. See if this resonates with you. Too often as we get older, we seem to go through life with rote responses, doing things the way we've always done them. And then we find ourselves saying, wow, doesn't it seem like time's really flying? It's almost Christmas. When if we step back and view our life and our experiences as if we were a little child, think back. That time seemed to stand still when we were engaged in the moment and taken an active participation in our life. So imagine for a moment that these difficulties that you might be facing, or things that are not going the way you think they should go, or bumps in the road, may be bringing you the gift. So if we recognize it and embrace it, we can take a fresh look at our life and respond differently. We can make different choices. Reverend Bonnie suggested to us an alternative to the fight or flight when you're in fear could be to step back, to freeze for an instant, take a deep breath, and then go forward, revision it with love and peace and joy. Clean out that fear and junk and make more room for fun and joy and love and laughter. So what I know is, and want to remember in every moment, is that it's up to me to choose the outcome I desire, because I'm powerful. From the Science of Mind, we read, we wish to let our roots run deep into that life which already is perfect and complete, and we want to live happily and without fear. And you will find that the love you use, acting as law, will definitely overcome the fear, the hate, and the sense of insecurity that come where there is a lack of love. Perfect love alone can cast out all fear. Love is always greater than fear. And when we practice this in our lives, difficult situations can transform. On the face of it, this too might just look like a New Thought platitude, but I want to get to the examples I mentioned of how Doug and I have used it in our lives and the difference it has made. As a practitioner, I've worked with people that have been dealing with illness, and it gave me some insight when, in a 12-month period, 3 of my 4 siblings were diagnosed with cancer. Immediately, the family went to fear, to concern about the outcome, to, oh my gosh, isn't that awful? What are we going to do? Do we just, stay apart and watch the inevitable unfold? No, we didn't do that. There was within all of us that we knew we had another choice. So we came together, made commitments to get together, come together in love, and to see the wholeness and the goodness that each of our siblings have brought to the family. And as a practitioner, I have counseled folks with financial issues. It's helped me when we came face-to-face with financial issues ourselves. So I want to tell you the way that we handled 2 different ones. And when we do things, I tell you what, sometimes we do them really big. We had been awarded a multi-million-dollar Army contract back in the late 90s. And we were ecstatic, because that's what we had been working hard for, to get some large contracts. In the process of that contract, however, a government employee passed out some false information about us to the regional commander, and the contract got terminated. And we were left with several $1 million in debt. It took us 6 years to work it out through the courts to a positive outcome for our company. During this process, we would fluctuate between, oh, ain't it awful, or why did this happen to us, or oh, let's just fold our tent and skulk away in the night. But we always came back to, no, that's not the truth of who we are. We deserve better than this. After all, we are God expressing. So Doug even went so far as to put a picture on his bulletin board of the gentleman who caused all this in our company, that brought pain to the company, to our employees, and to us. And he would see this gentleman with love. He would surround him with love. And I would at times wonder, how in the world can you do that? He's just a skunk. He knew what he was doing. But you know what happened? This individual was the one that was ultimately responsible in turning the situation around and having the court case come out in a positive ending with financial outcome that helped all of us, the company and the employees, better than we had imagined. So although we didn't like that it took 6 years, perhaps, we were delighted and surprised by the outcome. We saw that as religious science in action. And the second one was when we had a gentleman as a partner, and we had an agreement on how to split profits. Well, he violated that agreement when we got another large contract with International Truck. He wanted to keep all the money to himself and put us out of business. So at first we thought, oh, isn't this awful? What are we going to do? Blah, 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 blah. Then we said, no, that's not right. We are better than this. He is better than this. We want him to keep his word. We want him to express his true self. So that was a difficult period too, but as we revisioned it once again, saw this other gentleman with love, saw that he was better than this, saw at his core that he was love. Because what we learn in religious science is you love the person, but you don't have to love the behavior. And that may be difficult at times. Love the person, but not the behavior. And ultimately, this disagreement also came to a positive conclusion. He was not compelled to do anything. The court didn't make him do anything. He met with us right before we were to go to trial, and he made a choice of what he wanted to propose. We believe that the mental process combined with the work we were willing to do on the physical level transformed his attitude about us and created an outcome for us that was better than we could have imagined. Again, we knew better than to stay in the fear of the outcome and concern, and we knew to surround the situation with love. Trust me when I say, it sounds simple, but it's not always easy to do when so much is at stake. But love did, once again, come in and dissolve the fear we had around the situation. To change a situation, you need to change your perception and attitude. After all, religious science teaches us to work from the inner to transform the outer. Doesn't that sound simple too? Classwork helps. We know that there's always someone smarter than us, not smarter than us, gifted, less gifted, richer, not so rich, successful, less successful than we are. But what we all have in common is that we are born, we are all given gifts, we all live our lives, and we all die. The difference is, what do you do between those two dates. We have a choice of how we live our lives. So I encourage you to embrace the life you're given, to look at where you may be holding on to fear or concern or anger or unmet expectations, and just let it go. Flood yourself with love. If you have all this junk in your consciousness, how can you let in more love? How can you let in more joy? How can you have more fun? How can you live life more full? Life is about continuing to grow and to remain aware of what you're thinking and how you're showing up in the world. It's a grand adventure. Another thing that we learned in classwork, which is maybe you can tell I'm a big proponent of classwork. It may seem like it's too expensive, can't afford it, but there's the fear coming up again, so get rid of that. Another thing we learned that's so powerful is that we learned that our life is a laboratory. If we want to know what we're thinking, look what's out picturing in your life. If you want a different out picturing in your life, change what you're thinking. And watch and acknowledge when these things happen. Your perception, again, drives your experience. One giant gift of Doug's and my relationship is that we are on the spot, on the scene prayer partners. Whether I like it or not, he reminds me when I'm falling out of truth. And I do the same for him. And our love is such that I can tell him, I know, but it feels good at the moment. I want to be mad for a while. I want to hate this situation. I'll get over it. I'm aware of it. Doesn't mean I'm going to hang on to it forever, but I'll let it go. Because sometimes I'll be the first to say it feels good to get angry and think somebody did you wrong. You also have, if you don't have your own prayer partner, and I encourage you to continue taking classes and have prayer partners and stay with them even when classwork is finished. But you also have 6 practitioners here now that are ready to support you with prayer work, that are ready to support you by seeing the magnificence that you may not be able to see. We're ready to see the pony and all the poop of your life. So please, call on us. So I want to share a parable with you that we learned in religious science, and I understand that it's now being used in therapy in some 12-step programs. Stage 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Stage 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Stage 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I fall in. It's a habit, but my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Stage 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Stage 5, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I take a different street. Oh, I'm sorry, I blew it. Stage 5 is just, I go down a different street. So if we look at our lives, we can discover if we have any patterns like this, and we can discover if we're taking responsibility for our lives, or if we're choosing to say, ain't it awful, I'm not in control, it's his fault, and all the things that we tell ourselves. And once we've done this examination, we can make different choices. So once again, classwork. So in closing, remember, there are always changes happening throughout our lives. Ernest Holmes tells us that greater than any fear is love. Love dissolves all fear, casts out all doubt, and sets the captive free. Love, like a river of life, flows through us and refreshes us with eternal blessings. Love is fearless and strong. Namaste.